Joining us to discuss is David Blackmon, energy policy analyst and advisor and senior contributor for Forbes. So David, good to have you on the show. So can we just hear your initial thoughts here upon hearing the revoking of the endangerment finding?
Yes, well, I mean, this day was a long time in coming. The endangerment finding never did have any real basis in American law or the Constitution, the separation of powers. It was always an overreach, as the Washington Post editorial board wrote yesterday, by the Obama administration. And it unfortunately has formed the basis of a vast array of very onerous regulatory actions by the federal government for the last 16 years now. The Trump administration has already rolled back many of those regulations from both the Obama and Biden years, but there's still much more work to be done. And this endangerment finding, declaring carbon dioxide, which is fundamental building block for all life on the planet Earth, as a pollutant under the Clean Air Act, never really had any legitimacy. And I think this is a great day for the principle of the separation of powers.
So can you just expand on that a little bit more? You said that by declaring carbon dioxide, which I might add is literally plant fluid, a pollutant, then the federal government's been able to dramatically regulate human activity. So maybe just go a little bit deeper on this issue.
That's correct. Carbon dioxide, as you said, is plant food, and really atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide through geological history have been vastly higher than they are today. But the science isn't really what's at stake here. What's at stake here is whether or not you can define carbon dioxide as an actual pollutant under the terms of the Clean Air Act. John Dingell, a former representative from Michigan, was one of the authors of the Clean Air Act back in the 70s, and he criticized his own party for trying to do this, because he knew that there was no real basis for making that finding under the Clean Air Act. And, if Congress, or if the EPA wants to be able to regulate carbon dioxide, then it needs to ask Congress to pass another law, a different law with different terms. You're trying to equate carbon dioxide, which we all emit every time we take a breath, and every other animal on Earth does as well, in the same light as compound elements like sodium dioxide, nitrous oxide, and other actual real pollutants that are emitted from the burning of coal or natural gas to a lesser extent, and that come out of the tailpipes of cars. And so this was a huge overreach by the Obama administration. It never should have happened. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court allowed it to stand, and this is a good thing. This is a positive thing for the principle of America being a nation of laws and not peoples or politicians.
So will those things still be regulated, like, for example, CO2, without the endangerment finding?
Well, to some extent, yes. And I think people need to understand that this rescission of the endangerment finding on carbon dioxide will not do anything to lessen regulation of actual real pollutants, which have been cut back by well over 95%, every one of them since the 1970s. A coal plant today emits less than 1% of the actual pollutants it emitted 50 years ago. An automobile, less than 1/10 of 1%, and none of that's going to be rolled back. But on carbon dioxide and these big onerous regulations like the Clean Power Plan, as the Biden administration called it, which made it essentially impossible to build a new coal-fired power plant in America, which has had a pretty deleterious effect on the stability of our power grid, because we don't have enough baseload generation now on our power grid. And we see all these terrible consequences during the big freeze of the last few weeks for people in certain parts of the country. That's going to change, and it's going to change for the better for people. And as the president said in his press conference, you're also probably going to see the price of cars come down because they won't have to install these stupid features like the start stop feature. Every time you come to a stop, it turns your car off and then it starts it back up. And that causes tremendous wear and tear on your engine, among many other things, and great inconvenience for the driver. And it'll cut back on the cost of building cars in the United States. So hopefully, car prices will start coming down soon, too.
Can I just ask you, how much do you estimate car prices could come down? Because EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin said about $2,400. How much do you think will revoking this save Americans?
Well, I think, and that's the EPA estimate of the cost of these features that have been mandated by these regulations that will now be rolled back. Hopefully it'll be at least that much. The average price of an automobile in the United States is well more than doubled since the endangerment finding was put into place in 2009. And a lot of it's because of the regulations that endangerment finding justified. So I haven't seen anybody compile a really good estimate overall of what it might mean for car prices, but it'll definitely cut back on the requirements for what has to go into a car, and that can only cut costs.
And David, can I ask you, by your analysis, did the endangerment finding lead to or have any impact on efficient combustion engine vehicles?
On internal combustion, yes. Well, the efficiency of them, I'm not sure if it had a big impact on the efficiency of the engines because these car makers and the people, their scientists in these companies are very innovative and smart people who are able to overcome any problems in that arena. But it just required more equipment on the car. One thing, we keep showing that image of the tailpipe emissions. Um, those kinds of emissions are not going to come back as a result of this. I want everyone to understand that nothing's going to change in terms of the actual pollutants coming out of the tailpipe of your car. Car makers are not going to want what this is going to free car makers up to do is to make cars people actually want to buy. But no automaker is going to want to make a car and advertise, well, this one pollutes more, so it's cheaper. They're not going to cut back on emissions controls. As a result of this, it would be, they'd get pummeled in the press for doing that. So I don't think, you know, I know there's going to be a lot of talking points against this from the environmentalist community, but this is not going to be any sort of public health or pollution disaster as a result of this rescission.
Okay, that's reassuring to hear. So just one more question here, David. How permanent do you think these actions announced today will be? I mean, could a new administration potentially just walk back these moves?
They can certainly try. And of course that's the nature of U.S. politics, right? I mean, one administration comes in and undoes what the others did. This, however, has been done through the Administrative Procedures Act, through the proper channels of the regulatory process. This is not an executive order, which is, of course, less permanent than an actual regulatory action. And so it will be difficult for a succeeding administration to go back to this, mainly because you're not going to have the endangerment finding in place that's been endorsed by the courts. So if the next president comes in and wants his EPA to go back to this, they're going to have to issue a new finding that will have to survive scrutiny by the courts. And we could go into the Chevron deference and the disappearance of that last year, or the removal of that last year by the Supreme Court. But the Chevron deference was a very key element of why the courts approved this in the first place, and it no longer exists. And so this is going to withstand scrutiny of the courts, this rescission, and trying to do it again probably won't.
Okay, good to hear your analysis. As always, David, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.